Hello everyone, this is Nandini Ray and you are listening to the Maitri podcast Between Friends Conversations with Maitri. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month and we are amplifying this year's theme Building Safe Online Spaces Together, which once again highlights that sexual harassment, assault and abuse can happen with anyone and including in online spaces. In fact, we are seeing a trend that perpetrators are increasingly using digital platforms to abuse their victims. A National Domestic Violence Hotline sees a 146% increase in digital abuse calls from 2016 to 2018. In today's world, most of us are using online platforms and devices on a daily basis. But many of us don't have enough knowledge about tech safety. So, to discuss this topic, we have invited an internationally recognized digital safety expert, Adam Dodge. Adam is the founder of NTAB. His work is characterized by his dedication to training others to prevent and address online abuse. He acts as a special advisor to the Coalition Against Stalkware and sits on the World Economic Forum's Digital Justice Advisory Committee. Adam is also a licensed California attorney, and his work and expertise have been featured on CBS and in Vogue, the Mighty Technology Review, Washington Post, NBC News, GQ, and others. Welcome, Adam. It's our privilege to have you here with us on this show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to this.
Adam, it is so sad that while digital connectivity can be a powerful and positive tool for communication and intimacy between romantic partners, some people are using technology to hurt and control their partners. When we are working with our clients, we are seeing many of them didn't even understand that they were monitored and controlled by their abusive partner through technology. So we decided that we have to raise awareness about digital abuse and tech safety on our podcast, as this is a great community platform to share important information. And you are doing a lot in educating people about tech safety. So my first question is, what made you interested in raising awareness about digital abuse and tech safety? Is there a story behind it?
Oh, there's always a story. um, yeah, I have a background in working with victims and survivors of gender-based violence, and worked at a very similar organization to Maitri, and uh, in my experience working with those survivors in the digital age, more and more they were experiencing abuse that was taking place not in the physical world, but online and via their devices. And as somebody who worked for an organization whose mission was to help domestic violence survivors live lives free of abuse, it became clear very quickly that in order to meet that mission, we also had to make sure that the folks that we were working with were digitally safe. And when I sought training for myself and my staff, it didn't really exist. There wasn't a training out there for non-tech experts who work with victims and survivors of crime to keep them safe. And so I decided to create my own, and word spread that I was doing this work, and it turned out that I was not the only one who felt this way, and that a lot of people that are tasked with keeping their communities safe did not feel comfortable about helping people when they were being abused online. And I became very passionate about it and laser focused on it, so much so that I decided to leave a job that I really loved at a domestic violence agency to found NTAB, which is my organization now, to train and offer presentations to folks on how to protect ourselves online and via our devices. And so that's what I've been doing for almost 3 years now. And it's been quite a ride because I started NTAP right before the pandemic and before we all started spending a lot more time on our devices.
So it's much needed. I mean, it's much needed. We are seeing that need every day at our work. So tell our audience that how is technology being used to perpetrate intimate partner violence in your experience? What did you see?
Well, one of the things that I tell people quite often is technology facilitated domestic violence is more about domestic violence than it is about technology. It's the same unhealthy or abusive behaviors that we have always seen in this field:
Hmm.
power and control, harassment, threats,
Hmm.
intimidation, things like that. But those behaviors often get amplified online. So, take harassment, for example. I'm able to, if I was seeking to harass somebody, it's much easier for me to harass them online and through their device because I can do it 24 hours a day. I can do it anonymously. I can do it through a variety of different platforms. And I can do it with the knowledge that the person that I'm harassing really has to be online and be on these platforms to survive and thrive in the digital age. So I am seeing a lot of traditional forms of abusive behaviors being carried out online and on these digital platforms, even
Hmm.
more so now because so many folks are working and going to school online as a result of the pandemic.
Hmm. Give us some example that people should understand that what kind of abuse people can do through online.
Sure. To give you sort of a new issue or an emerging issue that we're seeing involves AirTags, which are personal tracking devices that Apple and other tech companies have created to help us keep track of our keys and our bags and our wallets and things like that. But what's happening is people are misusing that technology to monitor and track victims
Hmm.
without their consent. And
Hmm.
so it's a new form of cyber stalking or a new form of stalking where they can slip one of these devices that are not intended to be evil, but in the hands of somebody who wants to do harm with them, they are in fact very problematic, and they can track. These devices are very good at tracking people without their consent. So that's one example. That's an emerging issue. A more common issue might be somebody in an intimate partner relationship gaining access to the victim's accounts or apps without consent or authorization. Because the truth of the matter is, in a healthy relationship or an unhealthy relationship, device and account sharing and password sharing just happens. People, where we have so many accounts and so many devices and so many apps, sometimes it's just easier to tell your partner, oh, well, you just use my food delivery app.
Hmm.
Here's the password. Or I'll log into this account on your device. And then they
Hmm.
forget to log out. That can be totally fine. But because multiple devices can be logged into accounts at the same time, what we're seeing are cases where a victim has their account, they say their account has been hacked, but really what really happened was they logged into their Instagram account on their partner's phone once and never logged out, giving that their partner total
Access.
and complete access to their Instagram account. So unauthorized account access is also something we see very frequently because it's very easy to do. It almost is the kind of thing that falls in the lap of
Hmm.
an abusive partner. They don't even have to really try very hard.
Hmm. And sometimes, no, we see that abusers they're using technology to harm dignity of their partners, like revenge porn. And it's a huge issue I'm seeing right now. Can you tell us anything about that?
Sure. So, non consensual pornography, or often known as revenge porn, is the sharing or publishing of an intimate image or video without the victim's consent. So, what
Mm.
we see happen is people will share nude photos or videos of somebody without their consent or threaten to do it as a means of exerting control over them or or extorting them.
Mm.
And this is a form of abuse again. And I should say, revenge porn is something that most folks recognize that term, but I do want to be clear. It's not a term that I generally use, only because Revenge is not always the motivation. Sometimes people do it for fun or for from financial motivation. And pornography can imply consent, which is often not the case here. So non-consensual pornography or image-based sexual abuse are different. The funny thing is in the tech abuse world, no one's come up with a definition that we can all agree on. So, but at the end of the day, it's the sharing of intimate images without the person's consent. And this is also something that has become extremely problematic in the digital age because it, the internet did not create non-consensual pornography. People could take photographs before the internet of somebody without their clothes on and then show that photo to other people without the person depicted's consent. That would be an act of non-consensual pornography. But the
Mm,
thing we have to recognize is that the order of magnitude of harm was limited to the number of people that you can physically show that photograph to. Then you fast forward to the digital age we find ourselves in now, and I can take a photo of somebody, a nude photo of somebody, and upload it to the internet and share it with the world in 3 seconds.
mm,
And it will never come down. You can never scrub the internet of that photo with 100% certainty. So, but it's the same act of abuse, but because it's so easy to do now, and
mm,
because the magnitude of harm is so much greater, it has become a real it's become a common form of gender-based violence. And this is something I talk a lot about because oftentimes people will look at online abuse as sort of a second-class citizen when compared with physical abuse.
mm,
They'll say, well, online stuff, it's, not as serious as if somebody physically assaulted you.
mm,
But I really want people to get away from that way of thinking because the truth of the matter is I've worked with survivors of online abuse who have said, I wish this person would physically assault me so I could get them arrested because it's so hard to hold them accountable when they're harassing or sharing photos of me online and doing it anonymously.
mm.
So really raising awareness that our digital safety is as important as our physical safety. And
And it
yeah,
can it can impact your, one's physical and mental well-being if they're constantly harassed by someone digitally and they cannot do anything about it. And it can take a huge toll on someone's mental and physical health. So it's very important that we should address and we should talk about about digital safety, so that we can prevent this kind of abuse. And high school teens, they sometimes don't even understand that if they're sharing their nude photos and videos with their partners, and if after 2 years 3 years the partners, they're breaking up, that photo can be used against them to abuse, and sometimes they don't even have that kind of knowledge. So it is very very important what we are doing it today, that having dialogues, having conversation, so that people should acknowledge that this is a huge problem we are facing in today's world. And I was talking to someone and she was telling me now she knows that she was abused by her partner for a long time. She said that she didn't know that her partner is using technology to run thermostat, opening garage door and all that. And she was told that she has a mental problem. She is seeing things as she was gaslighted. So she didn't understand that he was using technology to threaten her, to control her, to make her scared, so that she can be paralyzed, mentally. So this kind of thing is happening, and people may not even understand. So, what are the red flags one should be aware of to know that their devices are bugged?
well, you're really touching on something that also happens to be my number one red flag is what you actually just said. When it's very easy to dismiss a survivor as being paranoid
Hmm.
when they're talking about being harmed through their devices or online. If someone says, I think I think someone's in my phone or tracking my location, or I feel like someone's changing the thermostat in my home. A lot of people will default to believing that they're seeing things, or they're making it up, or they're paranoid. And we live in an age where it used to be James Bond type stuff. That kind of surveillance is no longer required. That's not a James Bond issue. That is absolutely something an unsophisticated, non-technical person can do.
Mm,
And it's terrible when a survivor is told that they're being paranoid, because we should always believe survivors
mm,
when they're brave enough to share that they're being harmed or that they're victims of abuse, because as you know, that's not an easy thing to admit. So the number one red flag for me is a survivor or victim's instincts, because from the moment we wake up, we are often connected to our devices. We're checking our
mm,
phones, we're checking emails, we're checking the news, we're on social media, and often all day long until we go to sleep.
mm.
And that means that we're very intimately connected to our devices. And when something is amiss, when something strange happens with an account, or a device is acting strangely, or somebody knows something about us that we feel like they shouldn't know, it's easy to dismiss that as being paranoid, especially if others are telling us we are paranoid. But that is actually a really strong red flag, is the instincts of the person being targeted. Because if something is amiss in our technology is part of us now. We don't we don't have separate lives, online lives and offline lives. It's just life. And when somebody is messing with our the online portions of our lives, we pick up on it. There's part of us, our instincts, we have started to develop instincts, I believe, that are very accurate. And if
Mm.
something is strange or feels off, I highly encourage people not to dismiss that, and to update passwords or reset their phones, or pull on that thread, see what's going on there, because for me that's the number one red flag. Some other signs that you want to keep a lookout for is, if if your device is acting strangely, if your device's battery is running out more quickly all of a sudden, or maybe it feels a little warmer than usual, or
Mm.
maybe programs or apps on your device are closing without warning, it's easy to dismiss that as something related to a software update that hasn't happened yet, or maybe the device is old. But that can also be a sign that there's something installed on the device that might be monitoring the victim without their knowledge or consent, and operating in the background, which is causing it to lose a lot of battery, which is
Oh.
causing it to work very hard. What I'm talking about is stalkerware, which is it's an emerging issue, where it's basically an app that can be downloaded onto a device, and then tells the person who downloaded the app onto the device really everything that's going on that device. And so if a device is acting strangely, especially if you're in some type of abusive relationship or have left an abusive relationship, that is a big red flag as well. So, you can visit stopstalkerware.org, which is the Coalition Against Stalkerware's website, for resources. But at the end of the day, one of the best things you can do is factory reset a device if it's acting strangely and you suspect that there might be something nefarious downloaded on the device. But those are two really, the devices acting and accounts acting strangely, or the victim or the survivor's instincts are really good red flags to keep an eye out for.
So how do you, suggest that one should find out if their car has any tracking device? Like where do they find, or where do they go to search for?
So, I've been working in the gender-based violence field for over 10 years, well over 10 years now, and trackers in cars have always been an issue. They're becoming more common now because the technology is getting better. And
Mm,
a couple of ways we're seeing this happen. If somebody believes that their car is being tracked, one, if it's a smart car, if you can, like a Tesla or something like that, those cars can be tracked remotely right there. So, one, make sure that somebody else isn't tracking the car through the car's very own software because it's a newer car and it has this kind of software and internet connectivity already installed in it. Two, most cars have computers in them now. I mean, even 10-year-old cars. And the ways in which mechanics and auto servicing sites run diagnostics on cars is they plug in to get data from those computers. Well, there's a little port underneath the driver's side steering wheel that they plug into. And you could go to Best Buy or any tech website and get something to plug in there that is supposed to just tell you, okay, it's going to give you information about your car and run diagnostics. But people are misusing those devices to actually as GPS or tracking where the car goes. And so looking to see if something's plugged in underneath the dashboard is important. The third thing I want to mention goes back to AirTags and different devices like that, because it used to be GPS trackers would be underneath cars and would be pretty sophisticated, but they don't need to be anymore. People are taking AirTags, which are the size of a quarter in diameter and about the thickness of maybe 3/4. So pretty small devices, and people are putting those behind license plates, in sunroofs, under gluing them underneath cars and putting them inside cars if they have access to the victim's car. So conducting a visual search of an automobile to see if there's any just personal trackers hidden somewhere is also a really effective way, and we've had a lot of success finding them that way because they're not so small, they're not microscopic, right? They're big enough that you can see them with the naked eye. And the thing about these trackers is they're not going to be hidden somewhere in your house. They're going to be hidden on something that moves with you, which is your vehicle or your bag or your clothing. And so conducting physical inspections in those spaces is really helpful. So that's what I usually suggest with cars. And then if nothing is turned up from all those things, sometimes you can go into an auto dealership or a stereo car electronics installer and ask them to do a search for you and look underneath the car and a search that is more sophisticated than your average person could do. But in my experience, people that are doing this are engaging in these behaviors with trackers are pretty lazy. And so they're not gonna go buy an AirTag for $29 and put it behind the license plate.
Hmm. Oh my God, it's so scary. I even like when I'm hearing this thing, I mean, it's so scary. And some women may not have that kind of background when they're coming from a different country. Maybe they're not even driving, they're learning how to drive, and so they may not know how where to search. And because when I came here first time, I didn't know many things about how system runs here in this country. So it's
Sure.
very scary. And if like for immigrant population, not only women, immigrant men and women both are many times we learn things when we come here from a different country, and then we are depending on our abusers probably. And if that person is abusing us, then it is very hard to find out resources that can help us. So, where to report online abuse and this kind of abuse if someone knows that she or he has been abused by their partner, where do they go to report?
Well, you want to go to law enforcement. I mean, whether somebody is physically following you or using something like an AirTag to follow you, that's still harassment and stalking and abuse. And whether it's happening online or offline, you still want to take advantage of the institutions that are in place to keep us safe. So, law enforcement, restraining order applications, community agencies like yours, they they all exist to keep us safe. And while they're not all super effective at dealing with the tech enabled abuse issues because those issues are still new, very new and evolving, at the end of the day, those are the places that I send people. If you're looking for resources or assistance, well, before I go there, to continue to answer your question about reporting, you can also report to the platform. So if someone's harassing you on a social media platform, you can report any harassing posts or messages or accounts. But I say that I always have to temper expectations. There was a recent study that came out, and I think it's from the Research Center for Online Hate, I think, did a study, and they looked into 6 high-profile women on Instagram and looked at the kind of harassment they had received over a period of time, maybe a year. And they wanted to know how good of a job Instagram did at responding to and addressing their reports of abuse. And the study or the investigation found that Instagram did not act on 90% of the abuse complaints. So that gives you a sense that it's not always an effective avenue to report online abuse to the platform. It's still something we should do, but I always tell victims and survivors to set their expectations accordingly, because historically speaking, those platforms have not done a great job of addressing or preventing harm on their platforms. And then, I mean, that's really, you can also go to the FBI's it's called IC3, Internet Crime Complaint Center, where you can report online abuse as well. So those are some of the places that you can go. But it's important to recognize that none of these are slam dunks. None of these are going to you're not going to get an email or a phone call back immediately saying, hey, we got your complaint, we're on this, and we're going to deal with this, and we're going to take this person accountable, and we're going to make sure this abuse stops. In a perfect world, that's what would happen, but that's not what happened. And it can often require a lot of advocacy, self-advocacy on the part of victims and survivors when reporting online abuse. And one thing I tell them is, there's something my grandmother used to say, which is the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So you need to be that squeaky wheel. You don't just report the abuse once. You report it, and you keep reporting it to whatever institution it is, law enforcement, Instagram, whoever, until you get a response, until they act on your complaint. Because in my experience, reporting once isn't enough. You need to really be heard. You need to report multiple times, and even ask people in your support network to also make complaints to the online platforms about this abuse, so that it becomes more visible. I wish it weren't that way, but that's often what folks have to do.
And can you give some safety tips, information, and privacy strategies on the use of technology?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about domestic violence, for example, and relationship abuse in the digital age, it's really important to recognize, and I alluded to this earlier, that you do not need to be a tech expert to harm somebody online or through their devices, especially in intimate partner relationships where the person harming the victim has access to their devices, accounts, and passwords. So with that in mind, when we're dating and when we've potentially been mingling our passwords and devices and accounts with another person, it's always a good idea to log everybody out of our accounts. So if you are concerned, and even if you're not, even if you get out of a relationship that's perfectly fine and healthy, it's always a good idea to log all devices out of our accounts and then change our passwords. It's just a good practice. But and I always recommend folks start with their most used apps and accounts. So email, social media, things like that, which allow you to log all devices out at once. And to learn how to do that, I always just tell folks, hey, just conduct an internet search, say log out all devices Instagram, or log out all devices iPhone, and it'll take you right to the instructions on how to do that. And a lot of folks don't think to do that because we don't value our digital safety in the same way we value our physical safety. We might change the locks on our doors, or we might move because we're worried about our physical safety, but then when it comes to our devices and accounts, we're not making those changes. So I'm a big fan of logging everybody out. And then it doesn't have to be super complicated. But another really helpful tip is to always make sure that you have two-step verification enabled on all our accounts. So, and this is important because this is basically a safety backup to our passwords. If
Hmm.
somebody tries to log into, let's say I get a new phone
Hmm.
and I go to log into my email account and I enter the password for my new phone. Let's say it's Gmail. Gmail is going to say, "Hey, Adam, we recognize you entered the right password, but we don't recognize the device you're using.
Hmm.
So we're going to send a 6-digit code to your phone, enter that 6-digit code, and now we'll mark that device as safe moving forward."
Hmm.
That's a really great extra layer of security that people should be using whenever it's available, and avoiding password reset questions, because it's very easy, especially for somebody who is a current or former intimate partner, to know what your mother's maiden name is, or the street you grew up on, or what your favorite sports team is. That's easy information to guess. In those circumstances where you have to use a password reset question, experts recommend that you don't answer those questions honestly. So the street you grew up on can be some nonsensical answer like blueberry or I like frogs. It should be totally uh, just the wrong answer them incorrectly is
Hmm.
the suggestion. But those are a couple ways that folks can keep themselves safer. But at the end of the day, sort of my number one safety tip, and I'm bringing something up I've already talked about, but I don't think I can talk about it enough, is this idea of treating our digital safety in the same way we treat our physical safety, because we're spending so much time online and on our devices. We deserve to be safe in those spaces. And for a domestic violence survivor who's fleeing an abusive incident, often the last thing they're thinking about is, gosh, I got to update my passwords or log everybody out of my accounts. They're looking for shelter and safety and all these different things, but they do need to be thinking about their digital safety, because somebody could track them, somebody could steal money from them, somebody could learn things about them that can impair their ability to stay safe, or to live a life free of abuse, or
Hmm.
to move somewhere confidential. And so I'm constantly, my North Star, the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning, is this idea of treating our digital safety, valuing it in a really meaningful way. And I think if we start to do that, especially with young children who are going to be growing up in a digital world, that when they get online, they don't make riskier decisions online that they wouldn't make in the physical world, because they're not valuing their digital safety in a meaningful way. So I think all across the lifespan, from children to older adults, we need to start thinking that way. And I think if we do, then I think we might start making more informed, safer decisions, and take the time to make sure that our accounts are safe, when for a lot of us it seems like a kind of a pain to spend time getting into our settings or making sure that things are, location tracking's turned off or our passwords are updated. But it's a really
Hmm.
valuable thing that we can do for ourselves.
That's a wonderful tip that we should also teach our children to so that they think seriously that how important to be safe online. And thank you so much for coming to our show and educating us. And while survivors are not responsible for whatever is happening with them, and nor can they control their abusers actions, but with this knowledge and understanding they can take back some control and strategize there for their own safety. So thank you so much. And I'm sure that whoever is listening this discussion today, they will be hugely benefited with this information. And I personally have learned a lot today. And listeners, I would highly encourage you to share this episode with your friends and family. It's possible that this information will save someone's life. So thank you, Adam.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Yes. Listeners, this is your host Nandini Ray signing off today. Soon I'll be back with another topic that matters to our community. Keep listening to the Maitri podcast, Between Friends, Conversations with Maitri. Find all our episodes on SoundCloud and wherever you get your podcast. follow Maitri Bay Area social media pages. We publish important information to raise awareness and prevent domestic violence and power imbalances in partner relationships. Keep sharing our podcast and social media posts with all your friends and family, and we can make a safe world. Bye for now. Stay safe and happy. Thank you. This project was made possible by funding provided by Santa Clara County Office of Gender-Based Violence Prevention.
This show is for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as legal advice. Always consult an attorney for legal advice. Views expressed by guests of the radio show are individual opinions and not endorsed by Maitri.